and welcome to Black Hat Europe 2020, a virtual event. This continues to be an unprecedented year with many new challenges. The critical work you all do to secure our digital world is more important now than ever. And bringing all of you, the Black Hat community, together to discuss the latest security research, trends, and best practices is vital. While our event is entirely online this year, the Black Hat team and review board have made every effort to provide you with the same high standard of Black Hat content to help you. This includes a full lineup of Black Hat trainings, and it includes 40 Black Hat briefings over 18 tracks covering the latest security research from the global community. Outside of our trainings and our briefings programs, we have a wide variety of content that is available to all attendees. We have over 30 open source tools being demonstrated in the Black Hat arsenal. And we have many sessions on current trends and best practices being presented by our sponsors and our partners. Our keynotes and our review board lock notes are also open to all attendees. We have a packed agenda with the best content, and we hope you enjoy your time with us. It's now my pleasure to welcome Jeff Moss to provide his opening remarks. In addition to founding both Black Hat and DEF CON, Jeff has served as Vice President and Chief Security Officer at ICANN. He is an advisor with the U.S. Homeland Security Advisory Council and a commissioner with the Global Council on the Stability of Cyberspace. Please join me in welcoming the Dark Tangent, Jeff Moss.
Welcome to day one of Black Hat Europe 2020, our first virtual event. I'm Jeff Moss, founder of Black Hat, and it's going to be my privilege to introduce our day one keynote speaker, Pete Cooper. Before I do that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about different communities in our space, how I see them overlapping, and where the role of researchers and hackers, InfoSec, collide, create tension with government, and what we can do about that. So first off, I see there's primarily four actors in our space. We have organized criminals, mostly interested in how to make the most amount of money at the least amount of risk. And you can see this trend with the way they're approaching ransomware. Second, we've got governments. Now, governments are not monolithic. They're not as single-minded as, say, an organized crime group, because they have a lot of different competing interests inside. One part, maybe the intelligence agencies, are interested in verifying that other governments of the world are doing what they say they're doing. And to verify this, they may perform some clandestine online operations to steal some secrets. Is North Korea really complying with an arms control? Is Iran doing something it shouldn't be doing? Right? That's traditional clandestine operations. But on the domestic front, on the policy front, we see governments pursuing a handful of different agendas. Right to repair. Is it legal or not legal? Are you allowed to hack your own TV? What's the liability for an IoT device that bursts into flame? Biomedical liability for an implantable medical device. Right? There's a lot of unanswered questions right now. And where are the answers to some of these policy debates coming from? Well, companies, a third community, they are manufacturing the product. They're the ones that have built the infrastructure. They're generally interested in maximizing return, minimizing disruption, minimizing regulation, and minimizing embarrassment. They're the experts that built the product, so they're the ones that are mostly ones seen in front of government lobbying to change a law or add a law. And then the fourth community, which I think of myself as belonging to, the academic, hacker, and security researcher community. We're the ones that are really interested in trying to figure out, how does this product work? What does it really do? Underneath the surface, is it doing what the manufacturers claim? And if it's not, we want to tell the world about it. And through this kind of very energized, cyclical process, we've come up with disclosure, which led into commercial bug bounty programs. Right? We act as sort of a third party, a neutral third party, telling policymakers what is and isn't possible. And this leads to tension, a tension between the researcher community and government. On one hand, government really wants to understand what's possible. They need another voice to tell them something different that's not coming from the lobbyists. But on the other hand, if the way you're coming up with that information may be violating copyright, that might be not acceptable, right? You can't legislate based on stolen information, maybe. So what do we do about this? we have historically moved more and more into the realm of policy. If you look at the trajectory of hackers and InfoSec over the last 5 to 10 years, we are now providing that information. Policymakers have grown up with technology and computers, and they're asking us our opinion. This is a really dangerous time for us right now. On one hand, because they're finally asking us our opinion. So great opportunity. Great risk, though, is they're asking us our opinion. And if we screw this up, we may not be taken seriously. So it's very important that the community of the InfoSec researcher, the community of government, we learn from each other and we learn how to work through this tension, right? Governments have been around for hundreds, thousands of years. These technology researchers, we're pretty new, and we're not steeped in the ways of sort of this political navigation. And so we need to be cut a little slack, but we also don't need to be guided and shown how to properly get the most out of our knowledge shared with policymakers. And that's why I find this keynote so interesting. So it's now my honor to introduce Pete Cooper, Day One keynote, who's a Deputy Director, Cyber Defense in the UK Cabinet Office, and he's the lead for the government sector for the National Cybersecurity Program. He was ex-military, a fighter pilot, turned to cyber operations advisor. He also was the first to create in 2016 the UK's multidisciplinary cyber strategy competition, integrating a competition within the UK community. He's known for leading security change across the aerospace sector, his specialty, but also with work across the industry, private and government sectors. So he has a pretty big view of how security influences government, private. But for me, my first interaction with Pete was at DEF CON. You may not realize this, but Pete created and ran the DEF CON Aerospace Village, really making aerospace technology accessible. Average kids, hackers, researchers could get our hands on avionics systems. And with helping hand, with some guidance, he really helped foster a global community, now 3 years old, right? It's gotten its own legs under itself and is really helping to try to improve aviation security. It's fantastic. Pete will explore with us how we can work through our challenges to reduce risks to our societies. So it's my privilege. Pete, take it away.
Good morning. Welcome to Black Hat Europe. For me, hacking is a mindset, trying to understand how something really works, finding ways of improving it, being resourceful, being innovative, and finding solutions. And that's pretty much the way that I've approached everything through my career. And now I'm starting my next phase as I'm taking up the role of Deputy Director of Cyber Defense in the Government Security Group within the Cabinet Office. With an amazing team, incredible world-class partner organisations such as NCSC, and a hugely critical mission. Having only started the role 3 months ago in August, I've been leading the second aerospace village at DEF CON. Jeff, who you might also know as Dark Tangent, asked me to come and talk about the journey as I'm starting back at the government and what shaped my thinking as I start my next chapter. The Government Security Group is led by the Government Chief Security Officer, the GCSO, and the mission is a critical one. We enable government to protect citizens and provide vital public services by understanding and managing the security risks, by overseeing the day-to-day operations in support of security across the whole of government, including the response to serious and cross-departmental security incidents. As you can see from the scope, and this is a snapshot of some of the scope that we look at, there's a huge variety of critical organisations and services that we cover, be it across a huge number of civil servants and services that they're looking after, whether it's buildings, an estate, and the amount of professionals that we have doing the job. And it's set out in 4 pillars. It's set out in physical, looking after the physical security of buildings and all the services and assets. Technical, really looking after the key technical aspects. Personnel, to look after the personnel within the business. And I'm also honoured to lead the cyber insurance team in the Government Security Group, which looks after the government sector of the National Cybersecurity Program. So that's all of the policies, the strategy, the standards, incident response, the government red team, and much more. But like most people in the industry, I've not had a straight path to this role, and it's been a huge learning journey at every stage. Rewinding the clock. So, the 80s were great. This was my first we call it a computer. I'd probably call it a Raspberry Pi for old people. That had a luxurious 16K of RAM. And coding was something that you did because it would take about 10 minutes of listening to the tape loading your program to find out that it hadn't actually worked. So it was a great start to actually understanding some of the technology. And around that time, we also had some great hacker movies starting to come out, and a lot of my thinking was shaped by films such as war games, and about how to actually start looking at problems and digging into what the art of the possible was. But then Top Gun happened, and like a cat with a laser pointer, I was off. And after a lot of training, I ended up as an instructor in the Tornado ground attack fast jet aircraft, having done quite a few operations along the way. And when looking at something sharp and pointy, it's really easy to get focused on the cool stuff. But running around at 100 feet at low level is amazing. Going up against a massive adversary air package in a large exercise is amazing. And that's the cool stuff. But behind that is the time spent learning the basics and building apps and building those key critical skills. Because you've got to learn how to fly and do the fundamentals every single time without thinking about it before you learn how to fight. And the fundamentals have to become second nature. So that irrespective of what your adversary throws at you, you've got to be able to keep being able to do the fundamentals. Basics such as being able to do night air to air refueling is an amazing skill, but it took practice to get it right, so you could do it every single time, even if you had the occasional miss. Because sometimes if you couldn't tank, you couldn't actually contribute to the operation. So when it all starts getting complicated or going wrong, it's your ability to do the fundamentals without thinking that are going to keep you moving forwards and doing the right thing. And across cybersecurity, it's really easy to get excited and distracted about the latest sharp and pointy thing. But being able to do the fundamentals of managing cybersecurity risk, protecting against attacks, detecting those attacks, and minimizing their impacts are the basics that enables absolutely everything else. And as much as the Tornado might look really advanced, there was always something out there that was way more advanced, faster, could fly higher, and with much better kit. But not at any stage did we ever turn around and say our success was going to be defined by who had the best kit and the best technology. Because as much as technology is a huge part of what we use both in flying and also cybersecurity, we aren't going to technology our way through and out of our challenges. Because winning and losing isn't defined by our technology, it's defined by our thinking. We need to actually get through our challenges by challenging our thinking, and that will allow us to actually defend against our adversaries. And we see that with the adversaries, that in that success and failure isn't about that technology. They don't have access to alien technology that we don't. We've all fundamentally got the same underlying technology. Much of the time, success is about understanding our risks, opportunities, and knowing our strengths and weaknesses and how to manage them. If our adversaries know our strengths and weaknesses of our technology better than we do, then you're going to have a bad day. It's our thinking that allows us to make the most of our technology. One of the other key things that we also did in the aviation world, and it's the lessons that I've rolled into the cyber world, is that when a new aircraft comes into service, it'll be thrown at a whole bunch of independent and objective test pilots who are going to take it through its paces and really find out what would happen if. Their role and task is to challenge the assumptions, discover what works, discover what doesn't work, and really explore the envelope of what's safe and find the edge cases of how the users could potentially get themselves into trouble, and then really understand those risks. And once they understand those risks and that they discover that they're appropriate, they give it the okay to be brought into service. And we see a lot of that in cybersecurity. Bringing in new systems or services, our users aren't cyber test pilots. And we need to make sure that everything is secure out of the box and with great instructions about how to keep it and them safe and secure. But it's not enough to just do that, because we've also got to communicate about those risks and make sure the users know where the edge cases are and what they can do to keep themselves safe. And once we've communicated about that risk, then we need to be able to build trust in that system, because you really know that system and know how it's going to work. And then that is the key element of right at the very start of getting everything right. But even with that, and even with making the aircraft as safe as possible, even with the right processes, the user can still accidentally get it wrong. human nature will always catch us out. This is one of the early training aircraft that I trained on initially. So single engine, ejector seat, lots of safety systems, lots of procedures to keep you safe, check and cross-check and standby systems. But I still managed to make a mistake where I accidentally started shutting down my own engine, which isn't the best thing to do when you're flying in a single engine aircraft. It was a human error that I recognized fairly straight away because the engine started slowing down and it was all starting to go wrong horribly. I undid what I did, and bless the aircraft, it dug me out the poo. The system was designed to keep me safe, and I managed to make a mistake, but the training and the resilience built into the system got me back to normal, apart from my heart rate. Defense in depth is critical in both flying and also cyber defense, because it's key to remember that things will go wrong. Users will click links, back-end team could potentially set up a service incorrectly, and that resilience is going to stretch across the people, the process, and the technology. And you've got to design them down a secure path with that technology being designed to fail safe. And you can only really gain confidence in your resilience if you train and exercise your people, your processes, and your technology. And that will give you the confidence that no matter what's thrown at you, you can get yourself back to a safe state and a secure state. And then also, what makes a great flight? It's really easy to get distracted by the fast and the pointy, but it's the exercise, it's the enterprise behind it that really makes it fly. So it's the supply chain, the manufacturers, the services, the engineers, those are all the key elements that made the whole thing work. And it's exactly the same when it comes to cybersecurity and having great and resilient organizations. The full foundations of that are based around having a fantastic supply chain that you can work with, having manufacturers across hardware and software, having services that you're able to really work with fantastically well, and then engineers that can pull it together, and much, much more. And it's easy to forget about that when we're looking at the sharp and pointy thing at the coalface. But everything we've got has got some element of risk. Aviation had a really huge accident rates until the sector really started digging into the culture and understanding of what was causing those accidents. And it absolutely transformed safety. Flight safety culture was key in helping drive risk down to as low as reasonably practicable. As part of that role, I was a flight safety officer in the Air Force, which allowed me to actually really understand and learn about all of the key risks that were around the organization. And as part of that, people could come to me and chat about whether formally, informally, confidentially or not, to raise risks and issues all the way through to the top of the organization. And we always think about the incidents because the incidents get the headlines, but it's the events, the near misses, the problems, all of that stuff that's happening underneath the surface is all of the activity and stuff that will actually help you predict where your incidents are going to happen. And that's exactly the same when it comes to how we're defending ourselves across cybersecurity, is that the more that we understand what's happening below the surface helps us better understand and predict where those incidents are going to happen so we can prevent them. But we can only start doing that in an appropriate culture. And for this, a lot of the reading and research I'd done previously was around James Reason, who did huge amounts of great research in safety culture. And that it's all equally applicable into cybersecurity. And what he talked about was the fact that to have a great engaged culture, it really started off with a reporting culture, an organizational climate where people can readily report problems, errors, and near misses. But it can be really hard to put your hand up to error. But that's why you really need a just culture, where personnel can understand the boundary between acceptable and unacceptable behavior and are willing to report those errors or potential errors or those near misses or those problems, because that's where you really start getting the value. But if your organization and your team are raising these issues, then you need to have a flexible culture. Our adversaries evolve, and therefore we have to as well. Security isn't a static task. We need that flexibility at both the technical and organizational layers to respond to our challenges. And when we've actually started looking at those challenges, we need to have a learning culture so that it's more than just fixing it, but also understanding why and how something happened so that we can change and adapt all the way through. And really, the final keystone of that culture is that questioning culture. Empowering individuals to speak up if they see risks, mitigations, or opportunities. And if they think something isn't right, but even if they don't know the solution, it's really important to hear their voice. And all of this brings the power of the individual to the organization when it comes to cybersecurity. It really brings a key level of understanding what your risks are, and it helps be able to help you identify it and drive it down. But it's more than that, because when we talk about culture, we always think about people, but it's the culture that's going to really help you gain that unique risk insight across all of your data at scale and pace, and move beyond the stovepipes that we often see in cybersecurity. So, one of the amazing things about being in the Air Force at the time was actually getting to go out and do things like the large flag exercises. So one of the amazing ones I did was in Las Vegas, so in the ranges above Nellis, up against air threats, surface-to-air threats, big formations and heavy weapons. And this was back in 2000. And if you really think about the aims and objectives of what we were trying to achieve in that exercise, it was finding out what the art of the possible was, really not taking anything for granted, learning that technology had limits, exploring those limits, and learning that mindset was as important as the technology. Knowing that teamwork had to be built and grown through working together and building out that camaraderie and community. And it was an amazing experience. But then at the same time as Green Flag, in the same hotel that we were staying at the Alexis Park, one weekend, DEFCON 08 arrived. And I was thrown back into my technical roots and realized how much I'd actually missed it. But as I was sitting there swapping flying stories for hacking stories late into the night, I realized that what I was at Green Flag for was exactly the same as the community at DEFCON was there for. And they were finding out the art of the possible, not taking anything for granted, and all of the same things, right down to including the camaraderie and community that they were looking at and actually growing across DEFCON. It was just different domains. And it was a huge eye-opener to me, and actually really started me back on that technical path. And the other thing that really stood out at that time as well, and it's trying not to be really careful with language, which is a pilot is just a pilot. If that pilot is attacking you, then they're classed as your adversary. If the pilot isn't attacking you, then they're likely an ally, and then you treat them as such. Shooting down friendly forces is a really uncool thing to do. And when it comes to the terminology around hackers, a hacker is just a hacker. And it depends how you class yourself, whether it's a researcher or not. But that terminology doesn't necessarily make you an adversary. And that's where we actually really have to work together on clearing up the language about how we actually work together. But then taking those experiences and learning more about what collaboration really meant, I did a tour supporting joint ops where I'd be in as the air advisor, working with all the ground forces and all the other air forces. Hugely international, multi-domain with different languages, units, capabilities, priorities, and making life-critical decisions every single day. To communicate, you need to be able to communicate. Sorry, to collaborate, you need to communicate. And that wasn't just technical, because we're separated by more than just our languages, our specialisms, and our moral. We all have diverse perspectives on what our challenges are, and we all have our individual horizons. And the real value of collaboration comes through seeing the world through those diverse perspectives. Because by doing that, you then start creating shared perspectives. And you start pushing out your joint horizon so you can see further and develop a much better joint understanding of everything. And once you start having that joint horizon, and once you start having those shared perspectives and understanding, it transforms how you see risk. It transforms how you can actually use the resources and the actions you can achieve from them. It creates a unique collaboration so you can identify those opportunities and ideas that you would not have been able to do previously. And that's what it really means to collaborate. And if we look across everything we're doing in cybersecurity, be that in organizations, be that in the defensive teams or the offensive teams or internationally, it's how we collaborate together across all of our partners that makes a difference, and seeing the world through diverse perspectives. And in collaborating across those diverse teams, as I've said, the best solutions are those joint solutions. And it takes that collaboration. An orchestra is made up of different sections, strings, woodwind, brass, and percussion. But if you want to create a symphony, every single element is woven together. No one section can do it by itself. But it does need a bit of structure. It's difficult to scale a jamming session without it losing rhythm and becoming a cacophony. And also, while we're here, let's talk a little bit about the imposter syndrome. Just because we can't play the violin doesn't mean that we should feel like an imposter if we're playing in the same orchestra. It's possible to appreciate and really understand the artistry but we all bring and play to our strengths and bring something different. And it's how we actually bring that harmony together, because the best technology in the world needs the best policy and strategy to support it and bring it forwards and get the most out of it. The best policy and strategy is delivered by best technology. And it's how we weave all of that together that makes the difference. So when we talk about the challenges of getting policy and technical to work together and the different landscapes across there, then the key element to this is bringing the harmony and working it as a team. And in doing that and in building those teams, the skills and the people that you have in those teams are ultimately the critical enabler to all of that. And we've got to really focus on creating those opportunities for the next generation coming forwards. I was honoured to have founded the UK's first cyber strategy competition for university students to really try and help focus on building those diverse pathways, building those diverse teams, and opening up the aperture of what it means to have a cybersecurity skill and a cybersecurity career. And we would bring them into BT Tower in London and following off the Great Atlantic Council's framework, and we would put them into the role of advisors to the Prime Minister during an escalating cyber attack in the UK. We really tested them and we really gave them the opportunities to show what their skills were. Now, normally for a cybersecurity competition, we think about the skills and technical abilities that you have to demonstrate. But for this, we only put the entry criteria as a passion for the subject. And we really opened up that aperture and really encouraged the diverse disciplines and diverse backgrounds and everybody to come in and form joint teams and work together and learn from each other. And we really discovered an amazing set of competitors, an amazing diversity out there. And on gender alone, year on year, we had a gender split of 50-50, and has become the start point for many cyber careers that hadn't previously been imagined. And in the photos there, you can see the year one winning team as they won the Cybersecurity Student of the Year. The photo on the right-hand side is from Ainsley, who didn't start off her career in cybersecurity, but she's now definitely doing cybersecurity. And only by coming into the competition and experiencing it and getting excited about it and building that passion, and now she's doing amazing stuff in the industry. If we want to have diverse teams, and if we want to really learn from each other, then we've got to open up the apertures and create those diverse pathways into the industry, because that diversity allows us to learn from each other. And throughout, it's critical that we are going to mentor and bring on that next generation. We've always got to be thinking about how we can help them get to where we are now. There is no set pathway for cybersecurity. The best description I've had so far is it looks a little bit like the London Underground map, in that there's so many different stops to get on, so many different stops to get off, and there's 1,000 million different routes that you can actually take in the middle. But the important thing is getting people in and getting them on their journey and helping them on that journey all the way through. And that's why we have to really mentor them and bring them on. And key to this is building bridges across all of those communities. When we look across our challenges in cybersecurity, it's easy to sit and look across and actually not understand some of the challenges that other organizations are seeing. So critical to this is building bridges. This photo was taken at the wrap-up of DEF CON 27 at the end of the first aviation village, which I was honored to have founded and led the first one, first and second one. And it's with the most amazing group of friends and colleagues. When we initially looked at the aviation sector, there were challenges across who was actually working together, who wasn't working together, why they weren't working together, and really trying to understand how to make a difference. A lot of the time, it's really helping to understand those viewpoints and those perspectives, because we really all want the same things when it comes to security and building and managing great cybersecurity and secure and safe services. But it does take effort to build bridges and trust to create those diverse pathways. Because there's a lot of really good people doing really good things in the community, industry, and across government. And we need to put that effort into building bridges. But to start, you really need a vision that people can understand and see and get behind, irrespective of where they're from. And you need to start laying it out into a strategy to see how you can start bringing everything together. And sometimes that's really hard. And sometimes that can be just a basic strategy just to get yourself going in the right direction and start aligning what everyone's doing. But then you also need to have dialogue. because dialogue allows you to understand, and dialogue allows you to see through those different perspectives and build those partnerships, and critically start building the trust across all of those different partnerships. Because that's the thing that is going to be underpinning all of it, which is trust. And that trust is going to be the thing that allows you to create that community and camaraderie, and allows you to have that collaborative and positive space. And then the community starts forming around you and the passions that everybody is bringing to it. And those passions are then the thing that leads to change, that leads to action and leads to change. It can be really easy to have loads of dialogue and then not quite get around to the action and the change. But the passions and creating the opportunities to actually do something with them is key all the way through. We started with little in the way of aviation industry partnerships, but then after the first year, it not just helped build trust across industry and government and all of the rest of the community, but it also helped shape some industry perspectives on how they approach and engage with the researcher and hacker community, and actually helped really improve a lot of the way that we were thinking about things. We started building that shared perspective and that shared vision of how to move forwards together. And it really proved that from those early days of a small village with a few people involved to this year where it involved the first ever on-orbit CTF involving a satellite, aircraft, industry, and it shows that actually with not much in the way of resource or direct levers, it's possible to achieve huge amounts if you've built up an amazing community. And a great example of what a difference passion and community can do is the cyber volunteers. When COVID-19 hit this year and the world pivoted to coping with the huge healthcare challenges that it brought, lots of people across both the private and public sector pitched in to make a huge difference, as well as the volunteers. But with critical services dependent on cybersecurity, this year a new generation of volunteers emerged. The Cyber Volunteers, founded by Dan and Lisa, have achieved immense results. They've supported healthcare services around the UK and Europe on a voluntary basis, pulling together a huge amount of diverse groups, people, individuals that care passionately about defending what it is that's critical. They set up an amazing cyber threat intel and awareness campaign. They helped over 700 healthcare organizations in all the major European countries in 9 different languages, analyzed thousands of IPs, and identified and helped on hundreds of critical vulnerabilities. When we talk about building passion, time, and when we talk about taking things forwards, when we talk about making a difference, the passion, time, and effort behind these initiatives to build an international community around a common cause is amazing. And I think that everybody should give huge thanks to them, everybody that's made such a difference in the battle against COVID-19. Because across, especially in the cyber domain, it's innovation like this that makes such a difference. And really, in bringing it all together, there are so many similarities across all of the different domains that we look at and care about. When I started off my flying career, I didn't really think that a lot of that knowledge and a lot of that experience that I built up there would help me in my cybersecurity career. But it was absolutely critical, and it shaped a lot of my thinking, both as I've gone through the journey and I'm going forwards in this new journey. And it's the basics, such as staying absolutely focused on the fundamentals, making sure that absolutely, it doesn't matter what your adversaries throw at you, you can keep going back to those fundamentals and managing to keep just plugging through and keeping on the path. Remembering that incidents are just the tip of the iceberg, and that we've got to have a great and engaged culture to see under the surface, to understand what the problems are, to understand what the events are, and understand what the ideas might be to help see them. And actually bringing together huge amounts of skills, knowledge, and thinking and data to really start breaking through those stovepipes to work together. But to do that, we need to communicate, collaborate, and explore those different perspectives. And that takes time and effort, but it is so valuable in everything we're trying to do across cybersecurity. Because if we can do that, we then start forming those shared perspectives, and we expand out what looks like our horizon, and we start forming joint horizons. And it's across those joint horizons that we really start making a difference, be that across even the government community, the industry community and partnership, the research community, the hacker community, and the international community. The more that we form those joint horizons by working together, the better it is for everybody as we try and tackle the key risks that we have going forwards. And really, we've got to keep remembering that winning or losing is not defined by our technology. Winning or losing is defined by our thinking. We're not always going to have the best technology. We're not always going to have everything we need. But with creativity and great thinking and teamwork, we can actually achieve huge, huge amounts. And in doing that, we can really start transforming how we defend and move to that picture where we can really start defending as one. By weaving together all of that diverse resource that is out there, by having capability and perspective that we can weave into it as well, building out that clear vision, that strategy, and that culture so we can work together, that's going to allow us to build the partnerships and the teams that will allow us to create the opportunities to understand and reduce risk proactively and at scale. Because as we look forwards, our cybersecurity challenges are not getting smaller. Attacks are getting larger, attacks are getting more complex, and attacks are impacting larger and larger amounts of people on critical issues. We have to be able to keep transforming how we think and moving forwards so that we can defend as well. So, thank you very much. I really look forward to my next chapter and everybody else's next chapter, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.